Hey, this is Johnny from the Worship Sound Guy podcast, and I've got a question for you. Are you ready to hear some of the most insane pro audio and touring stories that you have ever heard? I hope you are, because today on the show, we have got Scott Ragsdale, who's toured with Joe Bonamassa, Beyonce, he's run sound for Oprah, and he has the wildest stories ever. I hope you're ready for it. Welcome back to the Worship Sound Guy podcast. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Matt Borsick. Matt, how's your week going?
It's going great, man. How about you?
Pretty fantastic. I'm excited for today's conversation. It's going to be a really good one. I'm just so pumped for everybody to hear it.
Dude, for real. I feel like we covered a lot of ground and we stopped recording. We were like, my gosh, we shouldn't have stopped recording. We have to do a part 2 now. So
yeah,
stay tuned for part 2.
Yeah, 100%. There will be a part 2 to this episode. So yeah, make sure you subscribe, make sure you review, all that good stuff.
It was so great.
So, okay, speaking of new stuff and exciting things, so we've been brainstorming some fun Worship Sound Guy stuff lately, trying to get you guys just, the best content, the best training, the best everything. Matt, talk a little bit about what we've been dreaming about.
Dude, yeah. So if you guys didn't know, end of last year, we launched our Insiders community, which has been absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
If you haven't checked it out, you definitely need to. You can go to worshipsoundguy.com/insiders. But we wanted to kind of see what we could do to serve the needs for like community in the production world, in the church sound community. And so that's been us doing that. And honestly, a lot of our time and attention has gone into that. And so if you're maybe not in that, then you may have been like, man, what have you guys been up to? That's been a big part of it. But one of the things that we did in the group was for a while, especially through the summer, we were doing weekly like group calls where we would tackle a subject like, drum mixing or vocal mixing, or, you name it, we've probably talked about it, and we get everyone on the call. And it was great. And we've been thinking lately that it would be so cool to open that up to our whole community here, listeners of the podcast, our Instagram following, kind of wherever you're seeing us. And so we are actually going to start doing these monthly Worship Sound Guy workshops. And I am so pumped about them. I'm actually I feel like we kind of got the little bugs out in the Insiders community. So if you're one of our Insiders, you bared with us, you guys are the best. It's awesome. But I'm really excited to share it with the world, honestly. And we'll probably put out a poll here pretty soon and see what we should start with, because we've got a few different guests lined up, some guest coaches that we have talked to that you guys will be stoked to hear from, I'm sure.
So excited. Whoever you're thinking, think bigger.
Yeah, for real. So, and they've already agreed. They're like, yep, let me know when and where, and I'll be there, and I will teach you everything I know. So these are going to be great. If you want to be in the loop for when we're launching those, when the first one's going to be, we'll put like a link to sign up for emails in the show notes. So just make sure that you are on our email list, because we'll talk about it there first. And then be on the lookout on the socials for a little poll, because you can help us decide whether we should start with like a drum mixing masterclass, maybe a live or a live stream mixing workshop, or vocals, or let us know what you want to see, what you want to learn, because it's up in the air right now. We could do a lot with these. So
yeah. Our whole goal of this is to be like super flexible, to be able to get the content that you guys really want to see and the stuff that you really want to learn to you quickly. So like, rather than taking months and months to produce like a full length like online course or something like we've done in the past, this will be more like run and gun, teaching you exactly what you want to learn quickly. So I'm really excited to kind of get that like workflow going.
Yeah, dude, after today's conversation with Scott, I'm kind of thinking we need to do like an A/B, like have Scott get on a workshop and mix on an analog console.
Yes, that'd be so fun. That'd be so fun. Yeah, analog versus digital showdown with Scott. That'd be incredible.
My gosh. Scott, we just voluntold you're going to do it.
We did. I'm sure he'd be down. Oh, man. Well, speaking of that, let's get into today's episode with the amazing Scott Ragsdale. Scott, welcome to the Worship Sound Guy podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. It's awesome to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah. So, Scott, you and I actually met at Infocom out in Las Vegas, kind of randomly. We were actually both at the Sphere for the Postcards from Earth movie that they've got there. We were hanging out with the guys from Clark, who are integrators here in Atlanta, good friends of ours, and got introduced through that. And so good to meet you. So cool to hear even just like some of the stories you shared while we were hanging out there. And so I think it's going to be even more fun to have you on the podcast. Now, okay, tell us just a little bit about kind of what you do now, where you're on staff at, and what you've been up to.
Well, I'm basically the lead at a local church called The Crossing in Chesterfield, Missouri. Was brought on at a time when the equipment was at their shelf life.
Oh.
And it was kind of a great time in the sense of it was right at the end of COVID. And, you know, I've been doing this a long time. So I just leaned into my experience and my network and had an incredible meeting with the leadership and got just full sign off, full trust.
Wow.
It was,
Nice.
here we go. And so, as you know, with COVID, with supply chains, let's just say it's been a journey, a little over 2 years journey.
I think that's saying it very nicely.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, Clark was our integrator.
Nice.
And have known some of those guys a long time. I worked on staff at Willow Creek Community Church of Chicago with actually our principal lead at Clark. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on right now.
Yeah. Well, okay, so that's a huge upgrade from going from a lot of things at end of life and then getting things revamped, especially coming out of COVID. What were you coming from, and what were you ending up kind of moving towards gear wise?
Well, the PA was starting to have problems. I think the solidifying factor is when it didn't turn on for an Easter. And we had been like already predicting, we'd already been, you know, the whole understanding of the age of the gear, where things were at. We had already started the process on a new PA design.
Okay.
And, you know, through that, it was just kind of like waiting for approval. Well, let's just say approval kind of happened quickly once the evidence of, hey, the PA's not exactly turning on. Give us some time here. We need to work on some things. We did eventually get it on. But that was the precipice for let's move on this.
Yeah, man, that speeds stuff up so quickly. We actually also recently did a new PA with Clark, and coming from like a 20-plus-year-old Renkus Hines rig, and yeah, just the process of like getting the ball rolling on that, and then getting approval from everyone. Yeah, it's such an arduous process. So I can imagine something like that really speeds that up.
Yeah, it definitely made the point. It's time.
For sure. What'd you guys end up moving to?
We went L Acoustics.
Nice.
A lot of reasons why I toured with L Acoustics, and it had just become like a sound that I thought, personally, the vocal in particular, it was the best. And the reliability of it, and just understanding how many people out there use it, and the concerts I was going to, I kept seeing it and loved it. So we stuck with L Acoustics, and it's been a huge win.
Nice.
That's awesome.
That makes me feel really good, because where I'm at, we're in that exact same spot where we had a few of our PA boxes. We're like, man, there's not a lot of coverage over on this side. What's going on? And L Acoustics is our front runner right now. So that makes me feel better.
There's I guess a price point too. You look at the whole picture in a church, right? You're trying to be a good steward of the tithe. You're trying to also get quality. You're looking at a product that has longevity and it's been proven. L Acoustics fit every single box. So, yeah.
Yeah, they're making great stuff for sure. Every time I hear an L Acoustics record, I'm like, man, you're right. Like, it's something the vocals sound so smooth and just really pleasing to listen to. So I'm totally with you on that.
I saw Keith Urban last year, and I look up and it's K1, K2.
Yeah.
I got introduced to the front of house guy. He was also on PM10 Ravage. No waves, so it was just the Ravage, the L Acoustics, and it was one of the best sounding shows I'd heard. And I'll give Keith Urban and his band full credit. You know, you got to start with the source.
But
it absolutely blew my mind how great it sounded.
Wow, that's awesome. So, okay, talking about one thing you said just on, you know, getting like full approval to like go ahead with a big upgrade, you know, massive, tremendously, you know, time intensive, labor intensive, cost intensive project. How do you approach a conversation like that? Where, I mean, having been on church, you know, on staff at several large churches, how do you get into that conversation of like, you know, proposing such a big project?
I think, and this isn't patting myself on the back, I have just been in this line of work a long time. And the Crossing leadership had been going to Willow Creek Community Church to a lot of the conferences.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing was I was mixing a lot of those conferences.
Oh, nice.
So they had been coming to just experience the teachings and learnings and the expansion of what these events do. And I happened to be sitting in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
So there was already like a trust based on my resume.
Yeah.
And them already experiencing my work. So when I sit down with the board, it all gelled pretty quickly. I didn't have to like, you know, prove much. They'd already heard, they saw my resume and it was like, you know, hey, we trust you. And we're gonna partner here and let's do this.
Yeah. That's awesome.
That's so nice. To start off with that trust, it's got to be awesome.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's something that maybe younger engineers sometimes miss. It's just like they want to go in and like do all the things and make all the upgrades. It's just like, hey, you gotta build that trust like pretty gradually sometimes, you know?
Yeah, you have to. I mean, being called to the church and working in the church, of course we look at, you know, secular concerts and what's going on out there. And honestly, Willow Creek was kind of a starting point for a lot of churches bringing technology into their auditoriums. Yeah. It's kind of like, you know, the moving lights, the big PA systems, soft goods, LEDs, just all of it kind of started at Willow Creek. And you also have to recognize that, you know, what is your church's vision? What is the vision of the pastor? How does this all fit into the scheme of what your congregation is expecting? And a lot of questions. I mean, that's one thing I will give Clark credit for. They asked us all the right questions.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you know, you can't just look at the money. You've got to understand, like, well, what are you getting? How is this serving the church? How is this serving the congregation? What is the vision? I mean, back in the 90s, I was a part of coming out of kind of the secular world of playing in a band and working in local concert scene to the local church already needing a PA system and a new sound console. And I ended up writing a 2-page letter to the senior pastor, and I basically broke down what I was proposing and how it fit his visions at all the points.
Wow.
That way it wasn't like, oh, it's cool, it sounds good, you know. He's a pastor. He doesn't know what I'm talking about. He doesn't know a compressor from a gate, you know. What's Midas? I don't know what Midas is. So, you know, and so that kind of clued me into like breaking down the walls between what I do and how those things fit into a church.
That's such a good point too, because I think so often, like we, you know, as engineers, we get really excited about all the, you know, the technical stuff and, you know, what compressor, you know, how many channels, whatever, you know, and like no one besides us cares about that. And so especially if you're proposing something, it's like, man, focus on what matters to them and how it aligns with the vision of the church. I think that gets so much farther than it's got the coolest compressor. And you got to also think about just where's the quality of everything. You know, we're a local church. You know, we're not Elevation. We're not Hillsong, but we still want our music represented in a very awesome way. And so, you know, I see a lot of cats out there that I know personally, and they've got the nice desk, but then they also have like 4 racks around them with this incredible analog outboard gear, which I love. It's amazing. But
I think we can also get there using the tools of these incredible digital desks that we have. Some of the extra 10%, 5%, 2% things that they're getting is wonderful. I support it fully. But we're kind of dealing with the local church. So don't think that you need all of that extra stuff to get a great mix, for your congregation.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's wise words for sure.
Yeah.
Because with YouTube, it shows everything, right?
Yeah.
So
it's true. It's true. And so I love too, just the point of I think it's so easy to come in with our vision and learning to, how to line that up with the pastor's vision or whoever upper leadership is, because it's their vision that ultimately matters. And I think that was one of my things I think with coming in here is you come with all these ideas. When I came here, it was 10 years ago, I was young and I'm I want to get this, I'm going to buy that. And, without having those conversations, everyone's like, oh, cool, good for you. I doubt that's going to happen until you can line it up with the vision that actually matters, And then now a decade down the road, we're like, hey, we're actually, pretty far along the road here. It's feeling great. But it took years of building that trust and learning to respect someone else's vision.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a journey for sure.
Yeah.
And it's all about relationship.
Yeah, it really
Bottom
is.
line.
Yeah, really is. Okay, so that's where we are now. Let's talk about, you've had just a tremendous career. How did all this get started for you? You were a musician first, right?
Yeah, I grew up in a very small community called Oakville, Illinois. I like saying it because there's only one Oakville in the entire world.
Oh, wow, look at that.
Yeah, kind of a cool fact.
Yeah.
About a 2,000 population farming community right outside St. Louis.
Dang.
And I've always been attracted to music. I love listening to music from a very young age. My uncle went across the world and brought back great stereo equipment from Japan and Bangkok.
Nice.
And my mom said, he put headphones on me when I was 5, and I just sat in the floor and I disappeared.
That's amazing.
And that's kind of been the journey. Then to be a part of playing music or creating music, within the grade school band, the high school band, playing with some buddies in a garage, it just kept growing, right? And I just never looked back. If I could have made money, a living as a musician, I would have never have left the stage.
Wow, yeah.
But God had another plan.
Yeah.
And I just kind of flipped from playing music to mixing music. And it's been about a 30-year journey now. And very, very happy.
Yeah. Was there
That's
a particular moment where you first got asked to mix something, or that you first were I'm interested in what that does, or is there anything hit that creative spark for you?
I think when I realized that my keyboard career in the 80s was coming to an end, the guy that was mixing my band, shout out to Ron Krause, was working for a local audio company, sound lighting, video, all that. And I started just hanging with him and was watching him mix and asking tons of questions and kind of getting very interested in that side of the snake. And one time we had a situation where he had to go fix something and he asked me to do the sound check, and I did. And he came back, he goes, "That sounds really good." And something just clicked in me I get this.
Yeah.
It's kind of like reverse engineering. I always like to say, if you ever read Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, there's everybody talks about the 10,000 hour rule.
Yeah.
Well, I was wanting to get into this band when I was in high school. One of my best friends played guitar, and he says, "There's no sheet music for this. You're going to have to learn to play by ear."
Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah.
And so basically I bought a DX7, Yamaha DX7 for anybody out there that knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And went to his house, and the very first song I learned by ear was Abacab by Genesis.
Oh, what a great choice. Yeah.
I think so too. I had good musical friends that challenged me.
For sure.
Awesome.
But basically pulling keyboard parts out of already incredible mixes. When I started mixing, I realized I knew where things went because I spent well over 10,000 hours in my bedroom, because I played in a band, put myself through college playing cover tunes. I don't know how many songs I learned.
Yeah.
And so it was like this revelation, like, oh, the bass goes here, the snare goes here, the vocal goes here. I was just reverse engineering everything that I did when I was learning to play by ear.
Dang.
Man, that is something, that's such a good point. Like now that I'm like kind of connecting some dots here, I think, so I started as a guitar player, and I think my own journey is very similar in that of like listening to all these songs, learning a bunch of parts. And then for me, it was like, you know, just this terrible high school band that I was in, wanted to record something. I was like, I think I know like sort of where all these pieces maybe fit together. I think that was a big part of it, just kind of picking stuff out.
Well, yeah, and I bet if I heard one of your first mixes, the guitar would be way too loud.
Through the roof.
But
Absolutely.
You know, one of my mentors, Robert Scoville, you know, he's mentioned mixing is actually a listening skill.
Yeah.
He recently said that again. I know it was out there, but that's the deal. Like listening all the time, and then that's your roadmap to how to mix.
Yeah. How this like brings up, because we've actually talked about this a lot lately, I think, with, you know, one of the things that comes up obviously all the time in church is training volunteers, training people who want to be engineers. And we've been talking about like how important it is. And I'd love like for you to speak on this, but how important do you feel like it is to either be a musician or have that musical side if you're wanting to be an engineer? Because I think it's not necessarily exclusive, but man, it helps. Like,
I know. Me and Lee Fields talked about this years ago. We both mixed Lincoln Brewster back in the day, and I've known Lee forever. And we had this conversation. We both feel like being a musician is a huge part of understanding how to mix music, for sure.
Yeah.
You know, I it's kind of sad to me knowing that, you know, Guitar Center right now isn't selling as many guitars, and, you know, things like that, because other things like video games or whatever in our society has kind of taken the place of some of those things. But man, I just encourage young people, if you love music, do the hard work, show up, do the hard work. It will pay off.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So how do you go about, let's say you've got somebody new coming onto your team who maybe they're not previously like musically inclined, not a musician, anything like that. How do you start coaching someone, or like have you coached someone into sort of developing those musical, you know, tastes and ability to listen? Like, how do you go about kind of instilling that in someone?
Well, I'll kind of expand what your question's saying. I've noticed whatever you're listening to in your car, that's what your mix sounds like. I've completely been able to pinpoint people's musical tastes based on the mix I hear from them. And I've also found out, and this is kind of a fun fact, people mix like their personality. It's a real thing. And so you just gotta like, if I'm dealing with somebody that's kind of wanting to do this, I love that we have these things called virtual sound check now. And we can just start with the basics, you know, and just talk about, you know, when you bring up a bass guitar or you bring up something, just listening to it by itself. Like, what are you hearing? Is there anything that we need to start with the source and understanding mic technique and all of that? Like, I really like to talk about all of it instead of just like, oh, it's faders and it's knobs. I just like to get, you know, a little under the hood, because it's a lot of everything that makes it all come together. So I want to kind of demystify some things. And, you know, but then I also say, you know, when people come up, do you know what all these knobs do? You know, it's like everything's about an input. Everything's about an input and output. You know, and so when you learn the channel strip, it just repeats itself. So also not to get somebody overwhelmed, like all of the knobs. No, let's only look.
It's just one. It's just one of those.
Yeah. The channel strip. We're just going to start right here, and then you'll notice that it repeats itself. So I mean that's kind of how I do it. That's where I start.
Yeah, man. Speaking of the channel strip, that's something I realized. I was actually training somebody the other day, and I was like, man, I really miss being able to demonstrate some of this stuff on like just an analog channel strip where you just like start at the top, like here's your gain, here's your pad, here's your polarity invert, and then just work all the way down. And like now it's just like it's so all over the place on digital consoles. Like not that it doesn't make sense, but it doesn't have that linear workflow to it like an analog.
You don't start with the same visual.
Yeah.
You know, I remember having a conversation with Robert Scoville. I said, man, I'm really glad I learned on analog desks.
Yeah.
And because I understand digital because of analog.
Exactly.
And he said, yeah, be really glad, because there was just that you know, comfort that when you walked up to whatever you were going to mix on, it was going to be the same. Now you can just move things around a desk everywhere.
Yeah, you're like, where is the gain?
No rules anymore.
You know, I'm right now building show files, starting places for my front of house, my monitors, and my broadcast.
Yeah.
And I've got some really talented guys. Well, we could put this over here, and we could. I'm just like, whoa! Like, we've got to like, if you're on a tour or you're just mixed, do whatever you want to do. It can be du jour. But when we have like different volunteers and different people coming up to these desks, we've got to make this look more like a traditional analog desk where this is always going to be here. Starting with the kick drum.
Right.
Starting with it, right? And some standards, some basics, and
just stuff that's laid out logically and sequentially and in a way linearly, I guess. That's a tough thing. I think a lot of engineers fall into that trap of like getting it almost too customized, to the point where it is unapproachable for anyone but them.
Well, you get a situation. Even guys on the road will get sick.
Yeah,
and if you don't have anybody in the tour that can jump in for that day that you're in the hospital or whatever, you've kind of messed it up. It still has to be understandable, to the common man.
Got to make sense outside of your head. I always say.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so speaking of touring, you have done some incredible tours with Joe Bonamassa.
Yeah,
you've mixed for Oprah and Lincoln Brewster, a bunch of other people. Tell us how you got kind of into the touring role. Was that pre kind of like settling into a church role, or was that kind of intermixed?
Well, I think it's another life lesson. You never know who's in the room when you're mixing.
Yeah,
and you try to knock it out of the park every time.
Yep.
And so basically, other people were advancing my career. Somebody would be sitting in the room, hearing an artist they love. Who's mixing this? I love this. It's Scott Ragsdale.
Yeah.
And I kept getting hired based on my mix. And so I had a buddy that worked for Harpo, which is Oprah, who would sit in my Christmas services and come to Willow Creek and hear my mix. And he started hiring me to mix Oprah stuff.
Wow.
So,
awesome.
Yeah, and then the same thing happened with the Joe Bonamassa thing. Jason Farah from SES called me up and said, hey, my favorite artist is looking for a sound guy, and I think you'd be perfect. But he heard my mixes because he was supplying PA systems and whatnot for some of the Oprah events I was mixing. So he was standing behind me, listening to my mix.
Yeah.
And so when Joe needed a guy, he called me. And so that's what you got to understand.
Yeah.
You don't advance your career. Somebody else does.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, that's so good.
It's kind of a life lesson. Yeah.
Like so many people need to hear that. I think it's one of, like, we've probably all been around someone who is like aggressively trying to advance their own career. And I feel like
how turned off are you?
Exactly.
Like, it's exhausting to be around
it's like,
someone
stop trying. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so tough. That's I love that. Just like go out there and try to crush it anytime you're mixing and be hireable, be a good person.
It kind of folds into like, to learn this craft, mix everything.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's a Boy Scout event, something at the ballpark, you're going to learn skills at every time you step behind the desk to mix whatever. And at the same time, be great to work with and knock it out of the park, and your career will start advancing.
Yeah. I feel like that's been a common denominator that, I mean, obviously we said that a bunch, but like every guest we've had on the podcast maybe has said something to that effect of like, you got to be awesome to work with. Like, just be a good hang, be good at what you do, obviously, but being nice to be around, especially in this industry.
Yeah, be humble.
Just be humble. It's such a big component of it. Like, guys who I know would say like, oh, I'm not the best mixer out there, but I'm really great to work with. And like, that's, and their careers are skyrocketing. And yeah, it just proves itself true time and time again.
Yeah. I mean, I know most of the guys out there mixing most of the CCM tours, and it's just because they're humble, they're good to, like we all kind of end up in the same room at times. And, we share the stories, we share the awesome experiences and what we learn. And there's nobody that's trying to like prove they're the king of the mountain in the mixing game, It's because you're always subject to like so many things. And you can get humbled pretty fast.
Yeah, no doubt.
I was always like, it's kind of that moment that you unmute the console and it's just quiet for like 2 to 3 seconds. It's like until the band starts playing, you're just like you just breathe a sigh of relief, right?
Yeah, for real.
Okay,
we're good. We're moving.
The house goes black and the crowd starts to cheer. You unmute the desk and it's like there's this slight pause before the band starts. and your mind's telling you, the amps have all been turned off, or
Oh, it's amazing.
Oh man.
Okay, I love to ask this question. What's like the biggest like oh no moment that you've had like during a show or during tour or whatever?
Oh gosh, I think I shared the one of the Church Gear podcast where I was doing the Oprah event at the United Center, and it was Beyonce, and I was working with Chris Raybould, and we were on a Yamaha PM1D, and I was basically either mixing artist or I was assisting who was mixing the artist, and Chris was there that day, and we had a crazy long sound check for her to do this bit called Who Runs the World Girls. It was a huge production, like 60 dancers.
Wow.
Dang.
And we finally get it all dialed in. And when I went to save his scene, I hit recall.
Oh, no.
And we had, this event was crazy. And I remember I just froze and the blood started leaving my brain. I thought I'm going to pass out. And I just slid my finger over the arrow, the cursor to the undo button, and I never had to use it. And I clicked on it, and it all came back.
Oh my gosh!
And so it was just one of those moments. This event only ran a $10 million budget. I just recalled and removed everything audio that had been done for 2 hours for Beyonce.
Oh gosh.
Oh man. Yeah, that is crazy.
That sounds rough.
Yeah.
It's those things happen to the best of us, man. And you just got to stay calm.
Yep.
And again, be great to work with. You'll get some grace back if you're, because those things will happen. I survived that one. That's the one I like to tell.
Yeah, that's crazy. Oh man, I'm thinking about it now. I'm like, man, I've never we got Digico 225 at my home church, and I've got the undo button right there. I've never pushed it, and I'm like, man, there's that moment where like, I hope this does what I think it does. I hope this actually.
Sometimes it's good to test those things offline.
Yeah, now I'm like, man, I should. I should test the undo button. Like I assume it would save me if I got in the situation, but I never tried it.
Tried it.
Oh man, that's so funny. Go ahead, Matt.
I was going to say, pro tip for this weekend: everybody go test your undo buttons.
Yeah, right. Oh man, it's amazing. So getting into, you said you guys are moving to the Ravage consoles now. Upgrading those. What's that been like to work with? Been hearing. We're just talking with another engineer who's touring right now and is thinking of switching to Yamaha. And I'm curious to hear about your experience with Yamaha and what that's been like and what you've liked about it and just kind of why you guys chose that.
I'm not, and my friends would tell you, I'm not really a gear person. I mean, I've had to mix on everything, and I've never let the gear be an excuse for me not to be able to get a good mix. I chose Yamaha because I've got 4 campuses. It's already an ecosystem of Yamaha.
Okay.
And I had great success with Yamaha when I worked at Willow Creek. I think they're now on the Yamaha Ravage PM10.
I think so.
I was on the PM1D for 14 years, and it turned on every day.
Wow.
So we had the faders, I think, were the only thing I remember going bad. And so within that structure and frame set, I just looked at Ravage, and I went to Nashville, Tennessee with Russ Long. Blackbird Studios has all the I should say the PM10, the PM5, the PM3. They're all set up, and he's got incredible tracks. And basically, I got to bring some of my guys, and we played the tracks, and we listened to what the Rupert Neve involvement with that desk did for the quality of the sound. The Mike Pre, the Silk, the Red and Blue Silk, the different companies like Eventide and TC Electronics, and there's just some incredible companies that they've partnered with that give you these plugins. As a matter of fact, they just released a firmware update 6.6, and they're giving you an F6 now.
Oh my gosh!
In the Ravage.
Wow, that's incredible.
And so when you realize that the desk is that powerful, well, now you're not dealing with latency.
Right.
And now you're not dealing with a third-party product crashing on you. And we don't need to go down that road, but it can happen. And,
yes, it can.
You've got this Bricasti reverb that just sounds so good, and it's in the desk. So, for me, it was truly the Yamaha ecosystem that was already in the building, the reliability of Yamaha that's always been there, and the sound of this dang desk. Adele's on it. The Foo Fighters is on it. I could go on. It's just kind of proven. It's mixing the big boys, and I like the way it sounds because it really reminds me, and this is just my opinion, it reminds me of mixing on an old Midas desk. It's got that analog sound that my ears are used to from back in the day that I loved. That I absolutely loved. And so when I've been mixing on the PM3, in my broadcast room the last 2 weekends, and I just started getting a warm fuzzy. I'm like, oh my gosh, there it is.
Wow.
There it is. I miss this.
So cool.
I so miss this. So, yeah.
Yeah, gosh, there was some of those old Midas desks. Man, I remember one of the first concerts I ever went to was it was Muse, and it was Mark Carolyn mixing on a XL3, I think. And it's just, you just felt it. You just felt that, like, that special, like, saturation and stuff from those pre's, and just, that's a sound like still like sticks out to me for sure.
I think the audio nerd in me would like to point out that, like, an analog mic pre, like on a Midas XL4 or XL3, I've mixed on all that, XL200. When you hit a snare drum, there's a transient. And digital converters sometimes don't like that transient. You see the peak and average, and that transient, you're trying to set your gain, and it's just, it's not a good time sometimes. On an analog desk, that analog mic pre would just kind of soak up that transient. It was almost like compressing it at the mic pre. It's what we liked. It's like, man, because I remember when I was on tour with Joe, we couldn't source a Digicode desk. We were in New Zealand, and I get there, and there's a Midas XL4 sitting there, and I went, oh my gosh.
Perfect.
Yes.
Nice.
And the minute I started potting up the kick drum and the snare drum, I just got happy. I'm like, where did we miss this in digital world? Why does it not sound like this? And I think we're getting closer. We're getting closer all the time. And so there's just something about an analog mic pre, because I got a buddy who's using the Rupert Neve. I think it's 12 channels of the analog with a Dante. Right? So
cool. Yeah.
I don't know the model number, but he's got it on his drums for that exact reason, because you got that transient that Rupert Neve analog mic pre soaks up, and you can set your trim, and it's awesome.
Wow. Dang. Man, that's something I mean to look into that. That's just, there's something about that just is as good as digital desks are getting, and as good as digital everything has gotten. There's just, there is something that seems to be elusive about, and I think it is in that preamp stage. Yeah, for sure.
It's really telling if you're able to, like, side by side, like, just put a snare drum with a 57 on it, and then move that input to another desk, and it's like, they don't sound the same. It's it's the same mic, same drum, same copper. The XLR. It's like, something in the converter isn't translating.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. So, okay, with you talk about Joe Bonamassa, what was it like mixing a band like that? Obviously, super, super different from anything, CCM.
I was just talking to a buddy of mine. It's like, I want everybody that mixes one day to get A-list players and singers.
Oh, yeah.
Because it just changes you to understand that it starts on the stage. Like, to bring up a fader on a Joe Bonamassa guitar signal, there was no compression, almost no EQ, some high-pass filter to get rid of any kind of low-end rumble, and just gain it upright. I mean, his sound was so dialed. I was just trying to make sure I captured it as honestly as possible to what he was bringing on the stage. And I had Tower Power horns at times. I had Reese Winan from Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble on a B3 that was actually used on the albums. Crossfire. I was mixing the B3 that was used on Crossfire by Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Cool. Oh my God.
Yeah. And so you're just bringing up these faders and you're just trimming them up and you're using some high pass filter.
Yeah, you're just like, that's the sound. Yeah.
That's it.
The band was mixing themselves. Now, I will say this. I always do this carefully because I don't want to negate what inner monitors do for us in modern worship bands. Because we do clicks now, we do guides. But if you have a band that plays on wedges, they're listening to each other.
Yeah.
So they can control the dynamics. They can control everything by just the feel of the stage.
Yeah.
Once we put inner monitors in, we're not listening to each other anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we've kind of lost that organic just if you ever go to a Joe Bonamassa show, it's going to go from a whisper to a roar.
Yeah.
And everybody's listening in real time in the air. And it makes a difference. So I will also say this. That stage was one of the loudest stages you'd ever want to walk on.
I'm sure.
And
I'm sure.
It was difficult at time to get a PA to cut through what was coming off that stage.
Oh, wow.
So there's solve a problem, create a problem, right?
Yeah.
And so there's good and bad to everything, and you just got to find the balance in that. But I'm just kind of giving you my experience in mixing great players. And there's just nothing like bringing up a vocal or a guitar or drum. I'll give you this one. Anton Fig was the drummer at one point. So obviously 29 years in David Letterman show.
Yeah.
When I potted up his drums, there's two parts to this story I want to tell you. I potted up his drums. We were in a rehearsal. His snare hit was the same on every hit. It did. Like the man has played on countless records. Like now I know why.
Yeah.
Like his consistency was a machine, but he was human, right?
Yeah.
But this is the part I want everybody to understand, and I think, especially if you're an up-and-coming musician, we're done with rehearsal. We're in sound check in Nashville. I'm putting my headphones away. I'm gathering up my stuff. I hear this South African voice on the other side of my desk going, Scott, and I look up and it's Anton Fig, and I just met him that day, right?
Yeah.
And he goes, what I was playing, was it working for you? Do I need to change anything?
Wow.
My mind, I'm going, you're Anton Fig, right?
Yeah. Of course, yeah.
So here is a man that has won Grammys asking me if his snare drum, if his toms, do they sound right? Am I giving you what you need?
Yeah.
What amateur drummer does that?
Yeah.
None of them.
See?
Yeah.
Why is Anton Fig on records? Why is he getting calls to go play with some of the best musicians in the world?
Yep.
He cares about his sound, and he understands that it all works together, that the sound guy, the microphones, all of it, it's a team.
Yeah.
And I have shared that story many times because it needs to be said.
Yeah.
Humility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do the work,
Yeah.
do the work, and be humble.
Yeah. That sums it up right there. And I think that's something that, especially when musicians kind of catch on to that, like of, embracing, we were talking about vision a lot, and, seeing how their piece of the kind of musical pie contributes to the whole. And when somebody gets that, it makes them such a better player. And I'm sure we've all had conversations with drummers where we've been like, hey, like, could you lay off the cymbals a little bit or whatever? And they're like, oh, I like to play it, whatever. And then, maybe you try a different approach. Like, well, hey, if you ease off a little bit for me, I can actually use more of you in the PA. It'll sound better. And they're like, oh, okay. You see like kind of the light switch start to go on of like, if I contribute, it actually makes the whole thing sound better. And like, I think the more people can catch on to that, just the better it gets for musicians, for engineers, for everybody, and the audience especially.
I'll throw this one out there because now we've kind of moved away from real guitar amps to modelers, right? And I think we're all running into this situation where dude man guitar player's in his bedroom dialing in his sound, and it sounds great in his headphones or whatever he's doing. And he's added all this reverb and all these effects, and then he gets into a room and now that sound does not correlate at all with what's happening musically from the stage. And I'm continually asking guitar players to dial that off back and let me apply the effects as needed because I've got them. So everything fits together. It's a collective whole.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And I just know that's kind of a problem right now just because, and you're inexperienced. So not trying to be the jerk. I'm just trying to say, if you want to continue to play and get asked to continue to play on the stage, when things are asked like, hey, could you dial back that verb? Your guitar is just, it's washed out completely. And it's just those conversations and those understandings. I just kind of felt I wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, that's so good. That thing specifically, literally, we've taken a few days, like over the course of the last few years, we've had all our guitarists come in and sit at front of house, turn them up in the PA, just everything flat, high pass on it, and that's about it, and let them hear themselves through the PA and kind of dial their tone out there. And the light bulbs that go on, and immediately they're like, oh my gosh, that doesn't sound anything like what I'm, and so you're like, all right, cool, well, let's work on it. Let's work together. Exactly.
Yeah, it's virtual sound check can be your friend or foe. And it's always good, and that's it. Do you have what it takes to be able to listen to yourself back, on a raw track?
Yeah.
Yep.
So you can self-govern it all,
So you want to get humble quick.
This isn't a personal, this is not a personal attack. This is the reality of what's happening. And so we're just trying to make everything better. So let's all be, loosen up our hands, loosen up the grip. And, if you want to go and make a band of your own and control it all, you can do that. You can absolutely do that. More power to you. But man, when you're working as a team and a worship team in particular, if we're talking about that, it's a collective whole. And I always tell people, learn what's on the record first. Learn what the original guy did on the record. And if it has a lot of effects on it, great. We can work with that. But learn what's on the record. Don't try to reinterpret a song before you're asked to.
And I think we're in such a uniquely great time to be able to do, like, you can go to multitracks.com, you can listen to what's on the album and you can hear what their tone was, what they were playing exactly in isolation. And obviously, you're getting kind of the mixed version of it, but it's still, the concept is there. And I think it's so cool for musicians now to be able to listen to that and go, oh, okay, maybe I'll try it this way. And that's how it sounded on the record or whatever. And I think that's a really good, kind of jumping on point for somebody's tone.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Kind of goes back to what I said earlier about learning to mix by ear, or should I say, play by ear.
Yeah. Sure does. Well, Scott, this has been so fun, man. It's been a joy getting to chat with you and hearing all these stories and getting your insight. So thank you so much for being on the podcast. Appreciate it. We need to do a round 2 of this. I can already tell.
For sure.
Yeah, I got the gift of gab from my dad, so it's totally cool.
That's what we like.
You know what I liked about you? We share the first 3 letters of our last name.
This is true. Yeah, we got Reagan and Ragsdale, so that's instant connection right there.
That means a lot. Trust me.
It does. Yes, it does. Well, Scott, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.